everybody, I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps, and today I'm going to show you how to make this yarn wrapped tree. The base of this project is this wooden tree. You may remember my Fearless necklace, which I made with wood rings from Woodpecker's Crafts. When I made that, when they sent me those wood rings, they also sent me this tree for free. They sent me 2 of them to play with and make a project with and show you. So that is what we're doing here. So you'll need one of these wooden trees or more, however many you plan to make. And again, you get these from Woodpecker's Crafts, and I will leave the link in the description on this video or in the blog post, depending on where you're looking at this. The other things you're going to need are something to color the base of the tree with. I used just a Sharpie paint marker, but you can use paint, you can use stain, you can use whatever you like to color the bottom of the tree. Or you could leave it with the natural color or just put some urethane on it. But if you do plan to color it, you should do that first. So grab whatever you'd like to color it with. You'll also need some glue. Now I got this in a goodie bag, a free gift, at some conference, and I don't even remember which one now, but this is iCraft Ultra Bond adhesive. The key here is it dries clear. So you want to make sure you get something that dries clear because it will soak through the yarn, and if it soaks through and it dries white, it's going to look bad. Or it might look like snow, but I prefer something that dries clear. You will also need some yarn. This is some hand spun that I made out of not very good wool, and it's really scratchy. It's almost a little felted, so it really wasn't good for anything else. The best yarn for this project is something that's going to get a little fuzzy. If you see, this has a bit of a halo to it, and the more I handle it with the glue, the fuzzier it got. So your wool yarns are going to be best for that. Or other natural fiber that tends to felt, because with the activity and the glue it might felt a little bit. If you use a cotton yarn or a bamboo yarn, it's probably you'll see the individual yarn strands more. It won't give you this overall fuzzy feeling. If you want that, great, but I would probably go with a wool yarn for this project or some other natural fiber that's going to felt a little bit when you use it. And the last thing you'll need, and this is optional, but something to poke with. This helps you to guide the yarn strands when your fingers start to get sticky, but just make sure it's something that isn't, you know, your favorite thing in the whole world, because I'm going to wash this and it'll probably come out just fine, but there's always the chance of ruining it, so you don't want to ruin, you know, your favorite tool. So I'm just using one of my darning needles, and I think the glue will wash off just fine. So with all of that, it's time to get started. So first things first, let's color the base of our tree. And you want to do this before you wrap with the yarn, because otherwise the yarn gets in your way. That's the only reason. If you forget, you could do it later. It'll just be, there'll be yarn in your way. So I'm just going to take this marker and color, and I want to get a little bit over the edge here. Let me zoom in a bit more. There we go. So I want to get over the edge. It doesn't matter if I make a mistake like that. It's going to get covered up with yarn, but I want to make sure there's no bare wood showing. So I'm just coloring the bottom of my tree. I finished coloring. I did the bottom too. You probably don't need to. It's not going to show, but I was having fun coloring and I didn't want to stop. Really, that's the only reason. Otherwise, just make sure you get around the edge here. So that nothing shows when it's standing up. Now I used a Sharpie, which is going to dry really quickly. If you're using something else, you're going to want to make sure that it's dry. And just to protect my white work surface, I put a paper towel down, a tissue down. But I think even if I press on it, yeah, nothing's coming up. So I think I'm good. I can get rid of the tissue. Okay, so now it's time to start the fun part. We're going to wrap the yarn. So take out your glue. And we're going to go section by section, particularly if your glue dries very quickly. The one thing I like about this is the applicator. I can get a really thin bead or a really small dot. I'm just shaking it up a bit. So I'm going to start with kind of a large dot on the top because I want to secure it really well on the top. And then I'm just going to zigzag over the first section so that I've got points of glue all along at all the different levels. There we go. That may be a little bit more glue than I need, but for me, more is better than less. But if you put too little on, you can always add more as you go. So now I'm pulling out my yarn, and I'm going to pull a big free, oh, sorry about that mark. I went to a conference and that was for the marketplace. And they said it would wash right off. It did not wash right off. Anyway, so pull out a big bunch of free yarn, because the last thing you want is for it to be pulling or any tension coming from the yarn ball while you do this. So now I'm just going to start up at the top, and I'm actually going to make a little ball of yarn because I want more yarn up at the top, just to make sure I cover that. Oh, that didn't work very well. Well, we're just going to shove the yarn up at the top to hold it in place. You can fix this later, so don't worry too much about it. The top part of this project is the hardest. Decide which way you want to wind, because you're going to wind the same way the whole time. And the reason the top part's the hardest is there's not really a ledge to wind against. So for the first few rounds, just use your finger and kind of work the yarn around until you've built up a bit of a ledge to pull against as you wind. And don't worry about being perfect. We can correct this as we go. You'll notice though that I'm focusing on getting my yarn close to the previous wrap so that it's nice and solid. And see, I do have a hole at the top. We're going to fix that later. But for right now, and my glue's starting to dry out, so I'm putting a little bit, oop, that's too much. Spread it out. Okay, putting a little bit more glue on. And now I should be able to gently just wind. Okay, great. Now I've come to the edge of a section, and that's the hardest part because it keeps wanting to slip off. Well, not the hardest part, but that can be tricky if you try to wind directly onto it because it keeps wanting to slip off. So don't let it slip off and then come back and do the ledge when you have something on the bottom to support it. So I am doing the next section with some glue. Okay. And now what I mean by that is just start winding down here, and then when you have something to support that ledge area, then you can come back and do the ledge area. See how much better that is? Okay, and don't worry about going over your yarn a couple times. That's totally fine. The key is to avoid gaps. So there's a gap. I'm going over it again, and then I'm coming back down. Did you all see that gap here? There, do you see it right there? So I'm just going over it again, and if there's no glue there, you can put a little dot of glue there. Even on top of the yarn, you can still put glue. Go over the gap, and then keep, and this is why we're using yarn that dries clear, right? Go over the gap, and then just keep winding. Keep winding. So the yarn that I'm using is kind of a thinner, like a DK weight yarn. I guess I should have said that earlier. The thicker the yarn you get, the less of the shape of the tree you're going to have, the more it's going to even out. And a thin yarn, you're just going to be wrapping more and more. So I like the DK weight. Something even a little thinner, like a fingering weight, is probably good. I wouldn't go all the way with like a worsted weight or anything. This tree is too small, so you'll just overwhelm it and you'll get a cone. You won't get the actual shape of the tree. So I've come to another ledge. I put glue on the next section, and I am winding. And then I'm winding back up onto the ledge. Cover those bare spots. Go ahead and lay it on a little thick if you want, and I'm pulling out a little bit more yarn here. There we go. Okay, I've got some bare spots here, so I'm just going to add some glue and wind. And again, don't worry about making this perfect. The whole point is it's supposed to look natural. So natural things are never perfectly symmetrical. Okay, next section. We're getting close to the end here. See, it goes much faster. The tip is the slow part. After that, it goes much faster. I'm out of frame a little bit, sorry. Okay. Be generous with the glue. Don't worry about putting too much glue on, because if it squeezes through the yarn layers, that's great. It'll hold it together better. See how my glue coming up through the yarn layers? Not a problem. With paper crafts, you usually want to go light on the glue, but with this, if you saturate the yarn with glue, that's even better. It'll make it fuzz up a little bit more and look less like yarn and more like leaves. Here we go. I'm putting another layer on this part, making sure there's no gaps. And rotate it as you go, because you might find gaps on the other side. If you do miss a gap, it's not the end of the world. I'm going to show you how to fill that in. Oh, pull more yarn out of my ball. See, when it's pulling with tension from the ball, it gets frustrating. It doesn't want to wind where you want it to go. So pull the yarn out of the ball. All right, so now here is where we get to a tricky part, because remember, all the ledges we've done so far, we've kind of filled in from the bottom up, and this one, it goes all the way in, right? So I'm still going to fill in from the bottom up, but I got to get all the way around this bottom section to do it. So I'm kind of going to jump. I'm turning my tree upside down, and I'm kind of going to jump to this part and start filling it in the other way, if that makes sense. You'll see when I do it. Okay, I'm not worried about that ledge right now because it's going to take me a little while to get there. So I'm just going to jump with the yarn, just cross right over and start filling in from here. Okay, and then when I get to here, I can do a nice smooth circle. I'm letting the yarn be a little bit more loose so that it, not loose, but I'm not pulling really tightly, so that it doesn't, I don't want to build up this really thick. I kind of want to get along the base of here. And so I'm using my nail to press it down where I want it to go. And if your fingers are getting sticky, which mine are, then you can also use that needle that you pulled out, or whatever else you use to press with. So I've got a little bit of yarn in here, and I'm actually going to grab that needle and just kind of shape it a little bit the way I want it. Press it down here, pull it out where I want it to go. Okay, put a little more glue on around the edge. And you can see as my fingers are sticking to this, it's pulling the fuzz up. So it's making it fuzzier, which is totally fine. That's what I want. That's why I picked a wool yarn. So I'm loosely now, you'll notice I'm not pulling and I'm going really slow. I'm loosely wrapping this around because I really don't want to build up that bottom too much. Okay. And now I can turn it this way. And with this pressed down, see how I'm using my fingernails to press it down? I have a bit of a ledge that I can build off of to do this edge. I'm just going every which way till I start to cover that edge. And I'll lay it on pretty thick at this edge here, just to make sure I cover all of my wood. Put a little more glue on there. here. Okay, I think that is enough yarn. I do have a couple little bare spots, but that's okay. I don't want to add any more yarn. So now I'm just going to break my yarn because it's wool and it separates easily. If you want to use scissors, feel free. And then you're going to wrap that last little bit and tack the end down with some glue and just push it down into place till it disappears. Okay, now we get to do a little bit of tweaking. So starting at the bottom, I'm going to find my bare spots, okay, add a little bit of glue to them, and then use my poker, my little needle, and start pulling the fiber over to where I want it to go. Now, if I have a really big bare spot, I can cut another piece of yarn and add it, but I have enough yarn built up in here that I can just sort of shape it to where I want it to go and use glue to make it stick. So down here, it's a lot of just wiggling and shaping. And before it's totally dry, feel free to unwrap some strands if you need to as well. You can unwrap and redo until it dries. It'll just make the yarn fuzzier, and that is not a bad thing. Okay, so there's a bare spot. Let's put a dot of glue on that bare spot and bring over the yarn a little bit. Don't be afraid to manhandle your yarn, it'll just get fuzzier. There we go. I got a little bare spot there that's being difficult. So I may come back and put another piece of yarn on top of that one. Unless I can get this one to stick. Nope, it's stuck. We're good. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. If a little bit of brown shows through your tree, natural trees have a little bit of brown that shows through as well, so it does not have to be perfect. And you can use your needle to accentuate the curves a little bit more if you've wrapped a little too much yarn in there, which I think I might have. I think I'm going to take out the last few wraps of my yarn. I think I just have too much bulk down here. There we go. Take that off. Okay. And now I can bring this stuff up. Actually, I'm going to unwrap more. I put too much bulk at the bottom, and this is what I mean by unwrapping and redoing. Totally okay. I got a little too much bulk at the bottom, and I'm not happy with the shape, so I am just pulling some of it out and redoing it. And it's already sticky now, so when you rewrap it, you probably won't even need more glue. But let's get this bottom a little bit smoother here. There we go. That's a little better. So again, the more you work with it, the fuzzier it's going to get, and that is not a bad thing. So you can keep doing this as long as it takes you to get the look that you want. And your hands are going to get super sticky. Because you're dealing with glued yarn. But that's okay, it all washes off, right? There we go. I am happier with that shape. Now I'm just filling in bare spots with what's left. There we go. Use my little needle to scooch some things over here. Oop, found a bare spot. There we go. So once this dries, it'll be permanent, but for right now, it can all be moved around and played with until it looks good to you. So do exactly that. Keep moving these strands around. If you need more fine work, use your needle until it all looks good to you. So what I was saying earlier about if you have a bare spot and you need a little bit more yarn to fill it, just pull off a little bit, like a little inch or so, even less, of yarn. And this is already sticky, but otherwise you could put more glue down. And just pat it into place over the hole. I'll put a little glue at the edges here. Put a little bit of glue at the edges there. And just pat it down. And now my hole is filled. So if you see any more holes like that that you just can't fill with the yarn that you have already on the tree, you can add just a little bit of glue and a little bit of extra yarn and fill the hole. Now we got to deal with that top, because the top is already starting to come unraveled. You can see we added extra yarn at the top, right? So I'm going to peel it back, put a dot of glue back on there, and now it's a little bit sticky. So now I can just push it into place, and if my nails and my fingers are too sticky and keeps pulling it back up, I can use my needle to hold it and push it down into place. And the reason we put extra yarn on there was so that we would have some to form like this. Okay, one last look, make sure everything is nicely covered. There's a spot. There we go. When you are satisfied, just let it dry and you will have a yarn wrap tree that looks like this when it's all done. You can go ahead and decorate it too if you want. You can put sparkly things on it, or you can put little beads on it as like ornaments. Here, let me grab some beads. And you can just glue them right on, but you could add some little ornaments to your tree like this. Let me get a dot of glue on there. I'm going to keep mine natural, so I will take this off after I show you, but you just take a little dot of glue on your ornament and stick it onto the tree. And you can have little sparkly ornaments like that all over. So that's a cute thing. You can put a little bit of sparkly wire as tinsel, or sparkly crochet thread would work really well as a garland to wrap around it. What else? You can decorate it basically like a Christmas tree. And that is how you make a yarn wrapped tree. If you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up, share it with your friends, or leave me a comment. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel for more great videos. Thanks for watching.